All right, so my 7-year-old asked me, Dad, when are we going to Japan? And I really didn't have an answer for that. But what I do have an answer for is two new features dropping in Copilot Studio, skills and workflows, really defining the new experience. And I can show you, instead of talking about it, how to put these two new features to work. So before we start, this is not a deep dive. It's not an overview of the entire new architecture of Copilot Studio. That's for another day. It's just focusing on these two features, skills and workflows, putting to work, building something real, hands on, a little bit of a challenge inside Copilot Studio, tied to the rest of the Power Platform, the same way you'd actually use it day to day. Kick the tires with me. I'm Michael Heath. I'm a nerd, and this is Get Automating.
Get automating, enhancing humans daily.
If you recall, there was a tool created when Copilot launched or shortly thereafter called Prompt Buddy. The idea here was the democratization of prompts. Prompts are still a huge part of AI, but I see the shift. Personally, skills are becoming the new prompt. And so I thought, well, what better way to showcase skills and workflows in Copilot Studio than to build out a solution that helps us build out a skill, either describe or design, or walks us through it, helping us learn what that experience is like, but also some functionality to download the skill and share that skill with others, as well as rating the skill and being able to view it and approach it in a catalog of sorts. And that's what we're going to do today. So let's hop in. All right, so here we are inside Copilot Studio. We have the new authoring experience turned on. We're in Copilot Studio.preview.microsoft.com, and we're presented with two options, agent or workflow. We're going to start in the agent here. We're going to click on our Skill Buddy agent that I've created, and we have our Skill Buddy title. We've got our instructions here. And then what we're going to be diving into today here are our skills, our tools, which is our workflow, and we have a knowledge source here. Very minor part of this, and we'll talk about what that's used for. As I mentioned earlier, here's the skill file, right? So we'll just delete that for a second here, and we'll re-add it so you can see this is what adding a skill looks like today. I'd like to see this enhanced a little bit to where maybe we have a catalog here. Maybe we can pick from a repository of skills that we have. But for today, we're just going to add these skills, and we're going to take the skill that I created here and add it in. So now when we click on it here, we're provided with what the skill file actually does. We can replace it or download it here. Let's just run through quick overview, new Copilot Studio component model. Now, we have instructions, which in my opinion are becoming a little more trimmed with the idea here that skills are in place. Knowledge, tools, this is where workflows live, memory, so we can avoid some of that amnesia that has plagued previous models, all a part of this new experience. And notice the huge box there, skills. This is a really large part of the new architecture. And skills are these reusable nuggets, if you will, that can be invoked on demand. It's a skill markdown file, and this file can be accompanied by some supporting files. We're not going to look at our scripts today. That can be packaged along with, but just understand the skill file can contain helpers, and these really provide a little more context to the agent of what the skill is going to be used for. Let's talk a little bit about skills versus instructions, right? Instructions are always loaded. It's general, it's defining who the agent is, the role, the scope, the tone, any sort of safety netting policy for the agent. It really is shaping the overall response, not just specific tasks. And that's the difference, right? The instruction's not toggled on and off, it's always on. Whereas skills are loaded on demand, these are very specific for a task within the agent itself, the agent behavior. The whole idea here in having an agent that builds a skill, especially in the guided process, is that we get better at understanding what needs to be inside of a skill file And so what you're going to see as I show you inside Studio is you have this header, front matter, you'll have a description, you have some body information, an output format, an example, and guardrails. And what I'll say here is that one of the most important things I've found in a skill file that really help add additional context is we oftentimes focus on the why and what the agent or skill should do. And we sometimes forget what it can't do. So make sure on 5 and 6, when you're working through those guardrails and example, that you're providing it some context on, yes, what it should do, but maybe some of the landmines it should avoid as well. I created this using Copilot, which you can do as well. It will provide you with the basis of what that needs to look like, and you can tweak as you go, as you work through it, and most importantly, as you preview it, which is what we're going to do right now. So we're going to create a skill, and let's say I want a skill that helps me choose my next hike. All right, off we go. So the very first thing it does is it checks the skills catalog. That's our knowledge source. That's where these are actually landing. And if we come over here and take a look at this, you can see that I have my skills in this SharePoint catalog. This is just a document library where it's storing some metadata along with the actual file itself. Okay, so after it searches the catalog, it says, all right, we have not found anything. Let's get started. So this particular skill dictates two different authoring experiences. I'm going to use Describe Design today since it's just fast, right? It does a lot of the work for me. However, if you wanted more of a guided experience where it walks you through step by step, one question at a time, so you can get a little more familiar with how skills are built, that guided authoring may be the right path for you. I'm going to go ahead and enter one, and we're going to look at it from just a high level overview. So it wants a short description of what you want the skill to do. It gives me some ideas, right? Specific as mine: types of hike, location, fitness level, trail preference, etc. I'm lazy this morning, so I don't want to do a whole lot of work. So I'm going to say all those are fine. And by the way, it's going to start drafting this skill very quickly. So here's the markdown file. Why that's baking, why that's churning out, I'm going to come back up here at the top. We notice like a little bit of verbose, like back in conversation here. We can even expand it, which is really cool. I love this part because it gives me an idea as the builder of what's going on, but we can toggle that on and off to where it doesn't show us that information. This is the end user preview. So I love this tool here. So let's go down here and see where we're at. It made some assumptions. It's got the author in there, recommendations, right? Those sorts of things. I'm not going to tweak anything. Good to go. So now it asks us, we're posed with a question here. Save to my OneDrive only, which is part of the workflow, right? We're getting ready to invoke that. Or we can save to OneDrive and the skills catalog. Again, that SharePoint library that I just showed you. And we're going to go with two because, again, I want to share this skill. It's going to be a great skill. It gets people out there. And part of this is going to be assigning a category. It suggests lifestyle. I think that's fine. What's interesting about this, it says for a final check before running the workflow, it already knows the next step is going to be running a workflow. And so it gives me the summary before we are off to the races. All good. All right, so now I need to save the skill file and run the skill buddy workflow. So now through that skill file, through the instructions, it's saying, okay, we have to now work through this process. And now we need to execute on that workflow. I want to pause for a second and place emphasis on what is happening. We have an agent. And the agent goes about doing things the way agents do with AI, right? Very much sort of a different pathway every time. And what we're essentially doing with this workflow is saying, hey, we want to use AI. We want you to, given the skills and the instructions, to take your own pathway. But this particular portion, we need a repeatable outcome. We have an outcome that we want to look the same every time. And so, therefore, with workflows, we're able to give it that deterministic pathway and blend it seamlessly in with the agent using its instructions and skills. So while that's baking, we're going to look at the workflow. We're going to pick apart the workflow. Now, we do have our Skill Buddy workflow already added over here. And at this point in time, this is not how we access the workflow. This is the inputs and outputs, which we'll talk about here in just a second. We're going to come over here to workflow, Skill Buddy workflow. And wow, doesn't this look familiar? Obviously, if you're familiar with Power Automate, this looks like an old friend because it is. So we're going to start out when an agent calls the flow, and these are the inputs. These are the things that get passed through the agent. So this is the information that we need to make our workflow successful. And what's interesting, if we come back over here to our Skill Buddy agent and we click on workflows in inputs, you'll notice all of these pop in and map back to those required fields. Now, I'm not hard coding these fields. You'll notice that I'm just letting the agent work through these and auto populate these as it sees necessary. So, really cool feature there. I did have a few bugs there. I know the product team's working on this to where sometimes when I open this up, they're blank or they have some generic names to them. Uh, Probably will be fixed in the next couple days. But if you notice that, a lot of times I just go in and out and then it populates the fields that are needed. So when an agent calls the flow, gather this information, we go right to create a personal file. This is a OneDrive for Business connector. We pointed it to documents, cowork, skills. This is the same place I believe that Copilot Cowork drops in the skill files that it uses. So I thought, what better place to drop this than that folder itself? So this is actually taking that skill markdown file and dropping it into OneDrive. So if we look over here at file name, I'm just grabbing this dynamic content. So right here, typing in name, we'll grab that, right? And it already has this auto populator from what it's working on right now. Now, we do have to convert from base64 to binary, and that's exactly what I'm doing here. So you can, if you know that expression, you can drop that in here, or you can just have Copilot generate the expression for you. But either way, we need that converted to the binary. That way we can download it, we can open it, and as a file that we can work with. Now, we do have a condition here. And this condition, if you recall, maps back to that question that was posed. Do you want to save this to your personal drive or do you want to share this with the organization? And we absolutely want to share this with the organization. So we have a share to catalog is equal to true. So again, it is driving the decisions here. It is driving the response. It will detect that, yes, they went with two. So this is true. And we're going to go ahead and save this to the catalog. Let me bring this over here a little bit. Maybe you can see it a little better. Perfect. So we're saving it to the catalog, and that's where we have our two remaining actions here. We're going to create the file in our SharePoint catalog or skills library, and it's pointed to the site like so. Again, this is all in the repo for you. I want you to have your hand at building this out, following along. Got all the files, just play around with it, explore, learn, do all the things. And so this is very similar, right, as to what we just created in OneDrive. Could create a variable, but again, I'm kind of lazy. Grab name, grab the expression, off you go. And then we're going to update some metadata for that. If you take a look here, you can see all the fields that are populated within that. That's what we're doing here. So item ID, name, description, author. This is all dynamic data. Category, friendly name, item ID. That's making everything happen. And we're going to throw that all back to the agent. Now, speaking of agent, let's go out and see here. Save to your OneDrive as Hype Chooser MD. So let's take a look at OneDrive. We have the Hype Chooser MD done. That's in there. Also have it published to the skill catalog under lifestyle. Do a double check here. I think we just saw it before. We already know that it's created. And here we are. And just as a reminder, right, what we're doing here is just creating the skill and saving the skill. If you're wanting to utilize that skill, you would come back over here the same way and drop in this skill to the agent. And then it would have that skill as a capability. We looked at the skill, we've looked at the workflow, the knowledge source, is just pointed to the skills catalog. Why? Well, so it can chef to see what skills exist, and it can also look at the categories that we have available as choices there. So we can dynamically populate those in our agent rather than having to hard code this through the instructions or skills. All right, so we briefly explored skills and workflows. And for me, that wasn't enough. That's really when I had the idea, how can we democratize skills a little more? We work through this scenario of a agent that has a skill that is capable of creating a skill and then a workflow that saves that off to OneDrive and a SharePoint catalog. But the SharePoint catalog is not that attractive, but I know what it is, and that's a Power App. So I went ahead and built out a Power App. All right, so let's take a look at this Power App Skill Buddy catalog. We've taken all that data, right? We've been able to work through our agent using our skills, instructions, workflows, all those things, and we've got our data out to SharePoint. You could use whatever data source you want. I use SharePoint just because, again, I'm a little lazy. But we can go over here and search the skills now. Got it. We can sort by our category, governance. We can even rate the skill. What do we think about this skill? And that will also be calculated by other people that rate this skill. So we get an organizational rating. Is this a skill that's caught fire with the organization? Well, yeah, it is. So I need to make sure I download that and add that to my skills. And that will download that to our co-work folder. So we have it and we can use that as a part of our repertoire in our agent building and co-work. But just briefly, what's making this tick? We'll take a look here. We have our Skill Buddy workflow. That's a part of our agent. These are independent, just good old fashioned Power Automate workflows. But we have one that's helping us kick that skill over to our personal OneDrive again. And another one, Rate Skill Flow, that's placing our ratings inside this particular area here, our skill ratings, which is just me right now. But as more people populate this, it will start to calculate that and then push that back and forth with our skills catalog here and give it a average rating and a rating count. All right, just two features. And we weren't even exploring all of what workflows has to offer: human in the loop, series of stages and steps, calling Copilot for M365. That's not anywhere close to everything that's packed into the new Copilot Studio architecture and experience, but it's enough to build something real. Now you got all the files, you can go do it yourself. What I provide you in the Power Apps, in the repo, it's not all polished, right? There are things that you're going to find you're going to have to work through. You're going to have to work through renaming some of the variables. As you look at the solution export, you'll notice some things work with the agent architecture right now, some things don't. You've got all of it in there. I've tried to write up enough notes to where you can get there eventually. You can reach out to me if you run into problems, but take it, make it your own. It's unmanaged. That's what it's there for. Explore, go do, go learn. And until next time, get automating.